There's millions of cars on the road, and only 6% of them are electric. That's not a lot. If you look at, okay, well, what about California? They're about 18%. There's a little more incentives in that case. And the state's trying to go all EV, and of course, New York and 17 other states are following in this very foolish move. The reason for that is people need to really take a bigger picture and look. Now, you do your own homework. You can back up my facts, and you'll find it to be true. And you'll be maybe disappointed or disillusioned, because the truth of it is that when you're looking at a vehicle and saying it's better for the earth, it's not. If you look at a combustion engine car, or an ICE, we call ICE, internal combustion engine, from cradle to grave, that means all parts to make what it is, to what happens at the end when it's done, and how recyclable it is more green than an electric powered vehicle. So you think, okay, what about EVs? Well, let's start from the beginning. There are 7 rare earth minerals. There's cobalt, which causes cobalt lung. So we don't mine it here, and most countries don't, because it kills people. But don't worry, they're mining it in South Africa. And who owns the mine? China. Okay, then you got lithium, same problem. The mines are owned by China. It's also hazardous. We could mine lithium here in the US, but the EPA will never let that happen. And one of the largest lithium deposits is in Nevada. But it's also on Native American land. So that's a problem. Then you're saying, okay, what else? So we got cadmium, poisonous, hazardous, mercury, make it go crazy, but also it's dangerous. You have neodymium. That's a really weird product that people don't talk about. It's a magnetic ore, and it's in every single battery. And that's the magnetic property. So first off, that is the rarest of them. There's not a lot of it. And the veins that are there under the ground are all owned by China. So, okay, so we're not beholden to the Middle East for oil. We're not being self-sufficient here in the US. Instead, we're going to be beholden to China. Okay, so as long as you know that up front. So now you got these other rare earth minerals. So what happens? They take all these minerals and they melt them together and they put them together like a birthday cake. So there it is done. It's baked. They actually are baked, and some are made in the US and some are made in other countries, but all the minerals come from other countries because we can't mine them here. We won't do it in North America. It's too hazardous, and we're not going to put people's lives and the environment at risk, but we'll do that in other countries. It's like, but the environment affects everybody. It's not just like if one country's doing something wrong, it affects all the other countries, but no one talks about this. And I have a feeling that 10 years down the road, they're all going to be like, you were right. So here's the thing. If you say this is not recyclable, because the batteries are not recyclable, I know there's a company called Redwood Materials who is working on it, but there's a couple things that you need to know. One, it's not completely recyclable, because if I asked you to take the eggs out of a birthday cake, going back to that cake, you'd go, well, it can't. It's everywhere. Exactly. So those materials are all blended together, and they have to work in a certain way in order for each cell to be the battery for what you use, whether it be a Tesla or a Lightning or fill in the blank. And this does not, by the way, this story does not make the manufacturers happy with me. And many a times they won't give me the electric cars, so I get them from dealers, because I'm not going to play around, because I will review them all. I have no dislike for them. They're a very cool product, but you just need to know the facts. So the facts are these are not recyclable, and they can't put them in the ground. They can't send them to the moon. They're not going to send them out in the ocean. They're not going to do anything. They're going to sit in a salvage yard, and we're going to have an environmental disaster down the road, probably about 2030. Because that's when all these batteries that are pulled out of cars, when they no longer have life, there's going to be no use for them. Now, if you want to be the first billion or trillionaire, you'll probably be the person that can figure out how to separate this. But right now, there's no way to do that. And the hazardous properties that are within those metals are still there. So they don't just disappear when you bake them together as a cake. So now you got this battery. There are all these cells. Some are cooled by coolant, ethylene glycol. Others are cooled by other liquids. Most of them are cooled by something that's flammable, ethylene glycol, antifreeze, which is why you see that chemical chain reaction from the salt water, from the hurricanes, or cars that are flooded. When one catches fire, one cell, it heats up the next one, and it just causes a chemical chain reaction and keeps setting them off. So that's why it takes sometimes weeks and weeks for it finally to be done. And in order to recycle it, that battery, or try to, that battery has to be completely used. So it may not be good for a car. That battery has to be used on the secondary market to maybe store energy. But afterwards, when it's dead, like batteries in your remote control, you throw those in the garbage. We're probably not supposed to. Those can then be sent to a salvage yard, but they can't be sent to a salvage yard until they're completely zero. So people don't realize that. So now you got these cars and you go, don't they look cool? They're so cool. Sure they are. And what do you think those cool bodies are made of? Some sort of polycarbonate. And what's in that? Fossil fuels. So people don't think about that. So I'm going to give you just a tip on fossil fuels. It's in every single thing you touch, from a piece of paper to glass, they process medical supplies, medicine, the clothing you wear, the computers you touch. Literally every single thing you touch has some sort of product from fossil fuels. And it's mind-blowing, especially when you think about glass. You're like, glass? Yes. Even safety glass in cars, because there's a film in between, and that is made of some form of petroleum. So there's no way to get away with it 100%. So, and though it may sound great in an idea, in reality, it's never going to happen. So if you want to drive a Lada, which is a Russian piece of crap car, that's probably what you'd end up with if the government gets involved. Because they can't even handle the post office and Amtrak. I can't imagine them getting involved in the auto industry, because that's exactly what happened in the UK, and they destroyed the auto industry in the process of doing that. And they're already got their fingers in the US auto industry, which is concerning. So when you're looking at battery-powered vehicles, you should have the choice. If you want one, you should be able to buy one. If you live in an area where I live in the city, I don't travel very far. If I do, I take mass transit, whatever it is. I take a bus, a plane, whatever. Fine. You should be able to buy one if you want one. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to buy a gasoline-powered vehicle, a diesel vehicle, hydrogen, which is coming online from not just BMW, but Hyundai. A bunch of different manufacturers are working on hydrogen. That's going to be next. We also have CNG, and Porsche's coming up with e-gas. Very cool. Synthetic gasoline. I'm doing a ton of research on that. It's already in pre-production. And right now, they're figuring it's going to be around $4 a gallon, but it might be cheaper. That means you can put it into your old Porsche and still drive it. You put it into your old Toyota Camry from 1980 and still drive it. And I think that's really cool that people don't realize that could be the answer. And it's synthetic, like synthetic oil. It works. I love that thought process, because people aren't going to get rid of their cars, especially collectible cars. And people are like, oh, they're going to get rid of every gasoline-powered car in the world. Really? Who do you think buys those $35 million cars at auction? People with a lot of power. And they're not about to let the government or any politician squash their passion for automobiles. It's never going to happen. So it may sound great on the surface, but there's a lot of money and power out there, and that may be okay for you, but not for them. So I don't think that's going to fly so well, because it's always this, I get it, but you don't. What's good enough for me, but not for thee. You may see some of that, and that's what we're seeing right now. So these electric cars all sound great on the surface. You have to buy a charging station. It's about $2,500. That's on you to buy, and it has to be put in by a certified electrician. That's the thing. If you try to do it yourself and you do it wrong, you could burn your house down. And it's happened a lot. And it's because people think they can do it themselves. You need a certified electrician to put it in. It's going to cost you about $5,000 all in. Now, if you have an older home, like an old original historic home, something that's back before 1950s, you'll probably need to draw a whole new line. You may have to do a lot of new electrical work. Be prepared. So maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to find charging stations. But again, not all of them work.